Welcome to episode 11 of The Accursed. This is a story you are going to want to listen to from the beginning. If you're just jumping in now, I suggest going back to episode 1 and starting there. This podcast shares some scares and frights. It also delves into adult themes. Specific content warnings are in the show notes of each episode. Please check there so that you can honor yourself and your needs. I am happy to report that not too much has happened between this week and last. No deeply unsettling letters that hit a little too close to home. No weird vibes, not much of anything at all. Now, I was out of town for much of the week, which I'm sure helped. And, well, I guess the only oddity that occurred was as I was coming back home. When I get off the highway at my exit, I pass a huge park. Lining the roads that day, on the power lines, on the grass, everywhere. Crows. 50, 60, maybe more. Right there, welcoming me back. I wish I'd stopped to take a picture, but you know how those last few minutes of a drive are. It didn't feel ominous to me at all. The crows and I, as you well know, go way back. Well, before creepy letters and haunting stories, before any of this. The crows were here. For me. I think a lot about what Hazel said. It was in a story in episode 4 about how the crows don't bring death. They just hear her whispers and speak a tongue of the same root. I want that to be true so much because I would love to listen to their stories. I'm desperate, perhaps, to know the secrets those crows hold. Hazel has clearly not had an easy life, at least from what we know. But I hope, I guess, that the crows are a bright spot for her, because they are in mine. I do have 2 more stories for you today. I know I said I would work on sharing some of my own stories in regards to ghosts and things that go bump in the night, and I will. Soon, I promise. It's just, as I said before, it's not the easiest story for me to tell. And for my own sake, I want to do it justice. So I'm going to need another week or 2. For now, let's start with a haunted house. This is actually a new story. It was waiting for me when I arrived home. And I'll tell you why I chose to bump it up and share it this week after you hear it. It might be obvious then, though. Riley had married into money. Old money. Nothing could have pleased Aunt Grace more. Though given how it all turned out, I suppose it was good she had her time to be pleased and proud. Riley's husband seemed like a nice fella, though I didn't know him well. Samuel was his name. She'd been going to nursing school, and he was a resident at the hospital she was training at. After their wedding, they moved to the outskirts of a city farther away than I would have liked. She had begged me to come for a visit, saying it would be good for me to get away, and after a time, I couldn't disagree. It was a big old house, been in his family for ages, she said. Riley was so excited to show it off. I can't say I blame her. The house was fancy, with a parlor and a library and furniture that no one was allowed to sit on. A long way from where we had been, but Riley looked like she was born to be there. fitting in perfectly with all the charm and elegance. My guest room was on the second floor. A large canopy bed took up much of the space. The wallpaper was cream with delicate pink flowers on it. It looked like it was well suited for a child, except for the paintings, the portraits that hung just about everywhere. Riley told me they were Samuel's kin. I did not like the way their eyes followed her as she moved around the room, but I put a smile on nevertheless. That first night, I woke in the dark with a start, unsure at first of where I was or what was the matter. It took me a breath to feel the covers being pulled from my bed. Slowly, deliberately. I tried to hold on, tried yanking the blanket back up, but whoever was out there was stronger than I was, and the blanket got torn from my grip. In my exhaustion, I thought maybe Riley was trying to be funny. I reached over and turned on the bedside lamp, ready to see her standing there at the foot of my bed, that silly grin of hers. But in the light, I was alone. The tugging against the covers stopped as I sat up, listening to the night, trying to find something underneath all that quiet, but there was nothing to be heard. I looked around. The same remained true. Nothing. I turned off the light and laid back down. I hoped my mind was just playing tricks, though I knew better. I tried my best to fall back to sleep, but as soon as my eyes grew heavy, cold hands wrapped around my ankles, and I screamed to high heaven, not thinking once that I would wake Riley or her beloved. There was another tug, and I was pulled halfway down the bed. Riley came running into the room, Samuel right behind her, both in their nightclothes. She saw the look on my face, one no doubt she had seen before, and I watched as her face turned and crumpled with shame and distaste, looking more like her mother than I'd ever seen her. Her face softened with my apology. I must have had a nightmare, I said, a terror. I don't know what came over me. Samuel nodded and left Riley and I to be. She came to sit on the edge of my bed, even brushed the hair from my eyes like Aunt Grace used to do to her. She looked at me like I was fragile, like I was to be protected and not the other way around. I wondered if she ever felt something here, or anywhere really, or if she could push it all away and forget. I convinced her that I was fine and that it was just the night playing tricks. I smiled sweetly enough that she believed me and went back to bed. I managed not to make a scene the next 2 nights. I stayed quiet, even when the quilt was pulled to the floor, even when the bureau drawers creaked open and the curtains rustled. I stayed quiet, pretending all was well, counting the days until I could get back home. Riley pretended too. Pretended to worry. Pretended that there was nothing to worry about. The last night I was there, somehow, I managed to sleep. At first, at least. Until I heard the scratching, long and rhythmic. I kept my eyes shut tight as long as I could manage to, even when I felt the bed sink like someone was sitting next to me. I knew it wouldn't be Riley. I knew it couldn't be. but I opened my eyes just the same. There was no one, nothing, except for the paintings hung on the wall, rocking side to side, the scratching sound growing louder, more frantic as the picture frames moved faster and faster. I tried to sit up, but an unseen hand pressed down on my chest, pushing me into the bed. The hand was so cold, I could feel the chill through the quilt that still covered me. Panic set in as the pressure on my chest grew heavier, making it hard to breathe. I began to flail my legs and arms, trying for what I don't know. And the pictures were swinging wildly, and I began to hear a woman's voice growl and rasp, saying you, over and over. I kicked my feet and tried to holler, but there was no sound left in me. I saw her, the woman, for a blink, maybe two. She was young, younger than Raleigh or I. Blonde hair mixed with blood, braided and pulled behind her. I knew the look on her face. Not rage or anger, but terror. A fear so deep it carried through the ages. Maybe even the very same one that still crawls up my spine when the wind spins and the trees shimmer. I tried one last time to sit up, to push against what held me. I managed to move only a little bit, but it was enough for the pressure to break. I sat up with a gasp, dizzy with the need for air. I don't remember making a decision. I only remember the frantic run to the door and my hand on the cold metal knob. I remember the sound of cracking glass filling my ears. Each picture, each frame shattering one at a time and in rapid succession, shards of glass falling to the ground, all as the frames continued to swing. And the voice grew louder as the mirror that hung next to the door crashed to the ground, and I finally let out a scream. Raleigh and Samuel came running in, but almost everything stopped when they opened the door, save for one small picture whose momentum kept it moving for a few more beats. It was a small portrait in an oval frame. A young woman, blonde hair, braided and pulled behind her. Raleigh and Samuel stood at the door, and anger flashed in her eyes. I watched her swallow it down, maybe seeing the distress in my own eyes, or maybe noticing the red mark on my chest. But there I was, in the wake of destruction, and nothing to say for myself, other than that I was sorry. Raleigh shooed her husband off to bed, saying she would take care of everything, though the look that passed between them spoke of conversations I would never hear. I tried to speak, to explain, but she shushed me, shaking her head in a way that I knew all too well. Raleigh took me to the room next door, as if I couldn't manage on my own. Her voice dripped with pity when she told me to stay put and go to sleep, as if I could. I closed my eyes and listened. I could hear her humming to herself, just like Gran had. I could hear her sweeping up the glass. I could hear her gasp when the scratching sound returned. something fell to the floor. I even heard her whisper, harshly, "Tilly, stop." And it did. Those last few lines, they are what made me pick this story for this week. Those last few lines have been hard for me to shake. It deepens the mystery of who in that family knew what, who understood the family lore, who was affected by it. The story from episode 6, the one from the end of Grace's life, it makes it seem like she didn't see or understand much at all. But here with Raleigh, maybe she knows more than she's let on. She did hear something in her basement as a child, and there is another story I haven't shared yet that talks about her knowing when certain things were going to happen. She did grow up with Hazel. She must have seen something. Or maybe her response at the end is just her being superstitious. Our next story also brings in a little mysterious family lore. After Gran died, we would see her still. Some nights, a few times a year, when the moon was new and the sky dark, she would be there, a shimmer in her garden, humming in that way she did. So very different than the hum that rose from the world beyond the old stone fence. The first time I saw her, she'd been gone about a year. I was helping Pop close up the house for the night. I caught sight of her as I went to shut the window. My breath hitched and my knees went weak. I held onto the sill to keep myself steady, afraid to even blink, and she'd be gone. Pop came up behind me, fussing, because I was just staring out the window, but he stopped short, a gasp escaping him. We stood there, quiet, as we watched her in the garden, her back to us. The scent of lilacs wafting through, even though they had bloomed months before. Gran had on her old green dress, the one she was buried in. Light green with a Peter Pan collar. Her hair was pulled back, though her face was kept in the shadows. She faded after a few minutes, leaving nothing in her wake. Pop and I didn't say much. He just squeezed my shoulder before going off to bed. There was no way to know when, if, we would see her again. Pop and I both got into the habit of glancing out the window each night just in case. When we did see her again, we went out front and sat on the steps. It became our ritual. We would watch her back to us, hands in the earth, planting even if the season wasn't right. She stayed longer and longer as time went on, never coming any closer. And we never did venture any further. She never turned towards us, never looked in our direction. Once, in the early years, Pop whispered her name, and we watched as the muscles in her back tensed as if she had to brace herself so as not to look over her shoulder. He never did that again. There were times, though, we could see her face as she moved, busy with her work, a glimmer in the dark. When Pop still had breath, he would tear up at the sight of her, tear at the sound of her song. I tried to be steady, to be stoic. I was afraid I would break the moment when all I wanted was to hold on to it forever. The older I became, the less worried of such things I was. Pop would stay as long as he could, or as long as he knew he should. But at some point, before she faded from view, he would pat my knee, ruffle my hair, and make his way inside. I would sit there in the quiet while Gran continued her work. But her humming would cease, and the world would grow still and quiet. Not a breath or rustle to be heard. Sometimes hours would pass without a noise, other times seconds. But the spell was always broken the same way. The crows. They would come from the woods, their cawing in the dark, the roughness of their song brushing against the night. Those crows would gather outside the garden fence, pecking at the air, until they would find a loose thread in the wind, pull it until something unraveled. Enough, just enough for her to step through. Once again gone to a place I don't yet know. The first time after we saw her, Pop and I went to her garden the very next morning to see if there was anything to be found. The dirt had been turned. There was no mistaking that. Within days, small tendrils rose from the earth. Vines that raced, not crept, grew along the ground, moving towards the old stone fence and beyond. When Pop was alive and able, he'd rip those vines up the second they started to grow, scowling and cursing under his breath the whole time. He even threatened to salt the garden, though he could never bring himself to do it. It's been a time since he's been gone, so very long of a time now. Almost as long since I've seen Gran. But those vines still grow, though I gave up on that fight. I've let them linger, let them twist and knot, making a bridge of sorts from where Gran once stood, growing into the woods she tried so hard to protect us from. I think the last lines here, too, are what get me. The idea of a bridge from the woods to the world, or maybe the world to the woods. It makes me wonder if it was really Gran that they saw, or maybe some sort of mimic. Because as Hazel said, those were the woods she tried to protect them from. But I suppose who knows what happens when you walk through the door? Who knows what's in those woods? Certainly not me, though I sure would like to. Also, until I got this story, I'd never thought of the crows as coming from the woods. I don't know why, but of course they would. Where else would they come from? Maybe it's because I want answers, but something here feels like an answer. Like somehow Gran, or whatever is taking Gran's form, the fact that she keeps coming back, it matters. Or that the connection between the homestead and the woods matter. The connection of the literal vines matter. I just I don't know why yet. Though, if you have any thoughts on that subject, I would love to know. You are welcome to share that or any other ideas you might have about what is going on here. You can email me at JoAnna@theaccursed.com. And that's what I have for you this week. Until next time, goodbye. The Accursed is written, created, and all around conjured by me, Anna Dane. You can find out more about the show at theaccursed.com or on Instagram at The Accursed Podcast. You can find out more about me at JoAnna Dane. The intro and outro song Cathedral is provided by Moby Gratis. Want an extra bonus story? Sign up for our mailing list at theaccursed.com and one will be delivered right to your inbox. If you like the show, there are 2 ways you could help us out. First, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you happen to listen. You can drop a rating there too. Second, share us with other folks in your world who might also love a ghost story. Thanks again for listening. Bye.